Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Michael and Patty podcast. It's a wonderful day on the Charlottetown waterfront. Our podcast is going to cover, as usual, Prince Edward Island real estate and everything PEI. But just as a side note today, my co-host Patty is a little bit on the sick side. She had food poisoning. I just have a couple questions for her. Number one, was it your own food? And how are you feeling?
I am okay. I do have a little tickle. And no, I did eat somebody else's cooking. I went to a function last night. And yes, sometimes when you go to these events, sometimes they end up feeding you very, very late, like after 10 o'clock or so. And yeah, I am surviving and I am okay. And I'm very excited for the show today and the topic that we're going to be discussing.
And what is the topic?
Well, today we're going to be giving all our secrets for buying a property on Prince Edward Island or anywhere, actually, for that matter. So do you want to get started?
We'll get started. So these tips are things that we may or may not share with clients because there's a lot of them. And you may want to have a paper and a pen handy or whatever way you take notes. But we're basically going to be discussing what we look at sometimes unconsciously and are aware of when driving by and seeing the insides of these properties.
Yeah, and if I could say, Michael, just the statement that you made that we don't always share everything. The reason that I know for myself personally why I wouldn't get into all of this with a client, especially while they're viewing properties, is it because it will become overwhelming. There's so much information. It can become more stressful. And instead of focusing on the home and the features and if it meets their needs, now they're stressed out because they're also looking for, I should be looking for all of this. And it kind of takes the enjoyment out of it.
And you're never going to find everything. These are just things that Patty and I may look for to give us a better idea of whether you're buying a quality home or not.
Yeah. And if you do listen to this and you're taking the notes, nice to have a little chart that you can kind of reference as you're going through, but not intended to take away from the experience of going house shopping because it's a lot of fun.
Right on. So first things first, and we've discussed this in other podcast episodes, you're going to find yourself a buyer's agent that's going to work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day to take care of your needs, and you're going to fill out and sign a buyer's contract to solidify that
relationship. And if you want, as a buyer, a realtor to be committed to you, it's nice for you to be committed to them. So these commitment contracts are definitely very important in the process.
Next thing we're going to do is set up a real-time search. You're going to have your agent pick out some homes based on your criteria. You're going to do the same, and you're going to do some drive-bys. So our first list of things to check are while you're driving by or sitting in front of the house, not looking overly creepy.
Or even doing Google Street View drive-bys if you're out of province.
Absolutely. So one thing I look for, and this was taught to me by a farmer, is the angle of the trees. This can tell you if you're in a super high wind area. If you go to certain parts of PEI, particularly in the North Shore, some of those trees are about a 60 or 70 degree angle, you're going to get some pretty harsh winters in that area. So look at how the trees are growing and what the growth is like. The other thing I would look at, and I taught this to Patty many years ago, is what kind of plant growth is there? And in PEI particularly, I'd be interested in plants and hedges and shrubs that grow in swamp to know where that water table is if I'm buying a house that's located on swampland. Other things, Patty?
Well, downspouts. So you're looking for, talking about high water table properties or swampy properties, you want to make sure that when you're looking at these homes, do all the neighboring properties or does this property as well have downspouts that are extended out? You can see them at 10, 15 feet plus away from the home. And is the property that you're looking at on a hill where every property at the top of the streets, water is draining down through your property? Guaranteed you're going to have a sump pump that's running 24/7.
You're jumping ahead.
Oh, well, that's all about the downspouts.
If you find that the house has a whole bunch of downspouts and they're extended, say, 10, 20 feet from the house, chances are they've had some water infiltration problems. The next thing you're looking for, and you've jumped ahead to this point, is hoses leading from the house, which are probably connected to sump pumps, which probably says that they have a wet basement. In some cases, they may even use it as a snorkel, jokingly, because the water's up over their head in the basement. But look for those long extension hoses. If there's more than one, they've got more than one sump up. We had one case in Charlottetown where she had 8 or 9, because I think they built her house on a spring.
I don't think I'll ever look at a sump pump hose the same now that you've referred to it as a snorkel. That's pretty funny.
Generator hookup and generators, always a good thing to have. You can see the Gener links, which allows you to plug a generator into your power meter, or maybe they have an external generator. Great thing to have in PEI. In my opinion, it's a mandatory item, and make sure that's in your purchase and sale if you want that with the house, whether it is attached or unattached, so it doesn't turn into a point of contention. I like to know if the electrical is above or below ground. Most is going to be above. Some of your higher end subdivisions will have it below. It's nice aesthetically. It's good for reliability because winds aren't going to knock over the poles, but it's something you're probably not going to find in a lot of places in PEI. Patty?
Screened rooms. So if you've noticed a house has screened rooms, usually a sunroom porch or something in the back, you may even see it at the front, or a cottage property as well, that's usually indicative of there being a lot of mosquitoes. There's certain areas on the island that have a higher mosquito concentration. There are treatments with this garlic spray and that can be done, but they need to be done monthly. It just may impact or affect your enjoyment of the property if you are in one of those areas.
And not just the house you're looking at, but look at the neighbors' houses. You know, when you go to Florida, you'll see complete neighborhoods and they all have these giant screened-in backyards. There's a reason for that. You mentioned this, so I'll let you cover this next point.
Yeah, so the slope of the land on the parcel and the entire subdivision. So there was a house, Michael, that you and I had gone and looked at a couple years ago since COVID, and I really thought it was a pretty interesting house. It was an agent open house, so all the agents were able to go in and check out this home. And I had complimented it, and Michael, as we were driving away from the house, you ended up making a comment. You parked up the street and you said, I want you to turn around and look back and tell me what you see. And I said, aside from the house kind of on the bottom of the hill, and he pointed out that both sides of the street were sloping, and that particular house was the low point of the subdivision. And then he did point out while we were going through the property, that the basement felt wet. They did have quite a few dehumidifiers, and it just kind of all pulled the whole thing together and made sense. So if you don't know what you're looking for and you're just enamored by the house and excited to see it, there's so much more that you could and should be looking at to make sure that you're not going to be dealing with a swimming pool in your basement.
There's that one street in Charlottetown, I'm sure there's a bunch of them, where one sump pump's entering into the next neighbor's basement, which is going to the next neighbor's basement. The guy at the end of the street has a swimming pool for a front driveway. Talking about driveways, remember that house I offered on years ago where they shoveled half of the snow from their driveway only to find out in the spring that the other half was completely destroyed and needed to be replaced? So they actually, in a very dishonest way, made sure they didn't clear the snow and part of the driveway that was absolutely destroyed. In this case, that driveway was probably worth $25,000 because it was a big driveway and a big loop, and they didn't shovel the loop. So know what's under the snow in the winter, because there could be something you don't want to see. Other things, is this a paved road? If it is a paved road, is it plowed in the winter by the government? If not, who plows it and what does it cost, if anything? All the road statuses as to what is plowed and not plowed is on the government website. They'll tell you exactly what is being taken care of by the government from November through May or whatever the case may be.
And with that, if it's not plowed in the winter, you're not getting waste pickup either in the winter. So just something to take note of.
You'd probably have to run your garbage a mile down the road to where there is waste pickup, or be really, really nice in the form of gifts to the local garbage man. Pay him off. Firewood. That can be something you'll see piled up outside. That can be an insurance issue. You can have problems with chimneys not properly installed up to the insurance company specifications, not necessarily code or the fire department. This can add up to maintenance and smoke. And it can also be a smelly house. If you're firing up a wood stove or 2 or 3 wood stoves in a house, this is something you want to take note of when you do go through the house.
Yeah, and just be mindful with regards to that, because this is something that I've just come across recently as well, is they may have had wood piled up on the front of the house, lining the driveway. You'll see that. And it went against the covenants. So just because the current owner is doing something, they may be violating the covenants that they've agreed to. And as soon as you buy that property and it transacts, you may be the one that has to come in and fix whatever was in place. So just be mindful of this.
And you have a note here, if you want the firewood, put it in your purchase and sale because it's not assumed to be included.
Yeah, because if it is the fuel for your heat source for the home, there may not be any firewood there at closing for you. Can create an upsetting closing day.
When you're driving by, look at the neighbor's houses, see how well they're maintained, how nice their grass has been cut, their hedges have been maintained. The rule to real estate is buy the worst house in the best neighborhood, not buy the nicest house in the worst neighborhood.
Yeah, or a C-grade neighborhood subdivision and buy the, top, the most prettiest house where you look like you're the mayor of the street. The rest of the homes, their values will be pulled up a little bit because of yours, but yours, be mindful, will probably kind of hit its peak and not increase in value. So you're not going to want to over invest into that home.
Patty has discussed fencing in the past in Prince Edward Island. It's usually looked or frowned upon, not so much recently, but originally when I moved here, if you put up a fence, you're actually apparently offending your neighbors. I would look at fences when you're purchasing as, do they have neighbor issues? You had that one house where they had a 10-foot fence on one side. Mm-hmm. That wasn't because they loved their neighbors. They had a crazy neighbor on one side. If they have a tall 10-foot wooden fence that you can't see through, it's probably not a cosmetic detail to the house. When you're driving around, if you can see it, you're looking at a waterfront home, look to see if there's any stairs to the water. See if there's a dock. See if there's an erosion barrier. Speaking of erosion, order the erosion report. See if it's a high erosion area. If you're looking at a house and there's a giant anthill, as they refer to it, which more is like a 3 to 4 foot hill built up in the backyard, chances are you're on a wet lot and they have a category 3 septic system, which would have a engineered septic system, which probably costs them between $20,000 and $35,000, $40,000, which may require electricity, a pump, maintenance, all that sort of stuff. It's something you may want to stay away from, and it also indicates you may be in a swampy or a buggy area.
Yeah, and you were the one that actually taught me that many years ago, that whether you're in the city or, you're in a rural area like you were referring to, Michael, with the septic, when you see a house built on a top of a hill, the hill's not in your backyard. That's your house has been built on top of this hill. It is because it's a wet property and they're trying to alleviate as much as they can how much water infiltration may happen in that basement. So that's why typically you'll see houses built up on, as you've always referred to it, as an anthill.
I'm talking about the septic being raised. You're talking about the house. So those are two different things.
Okay.
But if it is in a low-lying area, and that's a good point, make sure the house is built up on an anthill. Yep. Otherwise, you're going to have water surrounding your entire house, including that one, I don't know if you remember that red one on the water, but they built it too low, and the whole front lawn and front entrance and front driveway was a pond in the spring.
Yeah, I do remember that house.
Outbuildings and condition. Take note of that, and also make sure it's in your purchase and sale, because some people consider their shed one of the family members and will haul it away at closing. You ran into that? How many real estate agents do you know that have had to purchase sheds?
It's not common, but it does happen. And the seller has a valid argument because it is not a fixture. It's something they can easily put a forklift underneath and just move it to their new property. So if you want that shed in the back, don't assume because it's heavy, they're not able to drag it off the property.
Or sheds.
Sheds, correct.
We touched on this, wet areas, swamp, ponds. Again, pay attention to vegetation, can produce bugs, mosquitoes and black flies, so pay attention to that. Roof, take a look at the roof, see what condition it's in. You can look at the age. If the house is 15 or so years old, either the roof is going to go or it's been replaced. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and usually if you have 25-year shingles, what I've always been told is you should be replacing the roof approximately 3 to 5 years before the life expectancy, that we don't typically get the full 25 years. So don't push the envelope because you could end up with water issues in your attic.
And you will see mold on the north side sometimes. Do not let that concern you. Sometimes that roof could be in perfect condition. It's just it's not getting sun to dry it out, would be my guess. But you've seen that. Slate tiles in older homes could be asbestos, which can be very expensive to remove, unless, of course, like some people I've seen just take it off while they're smoking cigarettes and they have a death wish. But it does contain asbestos, which can cause cancer. And that would typically be in older homes, as well as in, where you're going to see this when you go inside, roofing, like the ceiling tiles, the 1 foot square asbestos tiles on the floor. There's also been certain paints that have had asbestos in it.
Yeah, the plaster covering, the textures, they talk about that, insulation, the things that wrap the
plumbing, they'll insulate plumbing with asbestos, especially in older properties.
So the homes that you'd find this between is around 1900s to the 1980s is when asbestos was used. Now you could request, and they are available even on Prince Edward Island, if you were concerned with this. And the clients that I've found were concerned with this is usually ones that have little ones and they just don't want to deal with it. But you can, as part of your purchase and sale agreement, request an asbestos test. There will be a company that will be able to come out. I believe they're in New Brunswick, but they will do an asbestos test, send it off for your peace of mind. So not to assume, because we are not asbestos specialists, that just because your realtor says, yeah, that looks like asbestos, unless the seller discloses it to be, you really should not, we're not qualified to make that determination. It should be tested.
Can't you just taste it?
I would not be doing that.
Neither would I. Probably not a good thing. Water ponding in the septic area where the septic leaching field is, particularly if it's colorized, you probably have a leaching field that's not functioning. And this could be an expensive thing to fix. Grading around the house and from the neighbors and surrounding area, we talked about driveways on a 90-degree slant. I had one house listed where the purchaser decided to move into this brand new house. The moving truck came in the winter. It went down the driveway, through the garage door, which was closed, and out through the back of the house because the driveway was about an 80 or 70, 80-degree angle. Something to consider when you drive by these houses in the winter and you do have these slanty driveways or other things. Imagine, I should say it's the opposite way around, driving by in the summer. Imagine it in the winter, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Weather for distance in the winter?
Yes. That means, if you're driving around in the summer, right, you got that beautiful drive out to Cavendish from Charlottetown, and it takes you 10 or 12 minutes, and it's wonderful, and there's rolling hills and rainbow around every corner. Imagine that in the winter when those roads are ice covered, if you're driving back and forth to work.
And that's one of the top reasons that I find when somebody comes to PEI, they fall in love with a rural property in that kind of setting, and then they realize I still have to work for a living, and I need to be commuting, whether it's to Summerside, Charlottetown, or wherever their employment place is or place of work, and they realize that the roads may not be the nicest. Now, we have had great winters for quite a few winters in a row, but you always have to plan for those winters where it's not going to be the best, and you could be snowbound, and unfortunately having to call your employer saying, I can't come into work again today because the province hasn't cleared my road.
Cavendish, Rustico brings up another interesting point here, which is?
Well, when you're in a more isolated community, it can feel a little lonely. You can
touristy. I'm talking about touristy areas. Right?
Yeah, touristy areas. Absolutely. Again, in the summer months, there's so much activity, and in the winter months, if you are not that kind of person, because I have people that are clients that have said, I am looking forward to the winter because I have my town back and it's quiet and it's just the locals. And there's other clients that just say, I can't deal with this. I have depression or I suffer from SADS. I need to be around people if it is going to be the off season.
Number of bedrooms. In PEI, you probably want to have something with 3 bedrooms or more, because when you go to sell it, that's typically what people are going to put in when they enter bedrooms in their search.
Yeah, and your property, if you have the 1 or 2 bedrooms, are not going to come up. People usually want at least a guest room, a possible office is very common today, as well as a bedroom. So try your best. I mean, there are 2 bedrooms and a few 1-bedroom homes that do sell. They just don't go up in value as quickly as a 3-bedroom.
I don't know if I'd go as far as saying that, but I do know people are just going on at the computer. They're typing in 3 bedrooms. They don't even see them. They don't exist, because we've had 2-bedroom homes that sat for months and months and months, put a 3rd bedroom in the basement, and it sells in 10 days.
Yeah, if the supply is low, the 2 bedrooms will be bought up, or if that's specifically that buyer pool. But that's not the majority. That's not the vast buyer pool that you're going to find, which will impact your price on your property.
Survey markers, trust them or don't trust them?
Don't trust them.
Be very cautious about survey markers. I've been involved in situations where owners have moved survey markers. I don't know about you.
Oh, I've
intentionally or unintentionally hit them with a lawnmower, or they hammer them in the ground, or they move them 10 feet over in the other property because they want more property. Don't trust the survey markers unless you've had a surveyor confirm where they are.
And another note on that, take note when you're looking at the property where the survey markers are, if they are visible, even if you take pictures of them, because this is something, unfortunately, I've seen way too many times. When the neighbors find out that there is a buyer and the property's closing, they will go over. They have, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, but they have gone over and hoped that the buyer wasn't aware that the survey marker has been moved a little bit so that they had a little bit more property. So just be mindful if the markers are visible, maybe where they were on the day you viewed the property and possibly closing it after.
I'll let you cover this next one, which is flower beds or gardens around the home.
Yeah, so this is a real important one. Does the earth touch the siding? This could be a red flag of years of rot, depending on the age of the home. It could indicate that the sheathing and the framing behind the siding could be compromised as a result, creating access holes for rodents, creating, heat loss. Could cause your windows to rot depending on how far up the moisture has been absorbed as a result of those flower beds touching the siding. So
if you stick your finger underneath the vinyl siding and you can stick it in 3 or 4 inches, it's probably rotten and there's probably a big issue, which brings me to my next point. Vinyl siding, the ultimate artwork in real estate, form of artwork. You can turn anything into a beautiful home by installing vinyl siding. So what should somebody do that's looking at a vinyl sided house? Particularly, I think what I would ask for, being conspiratorial, would be, when was the vinyl siding done? Wow, we just listed the house in March and the vinyl siding was done in January. So what's underneath it?
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Michael, because Google Street View allows you to go back, 2013, I think 2012, somewhere around there are the oldest years that you can, view the property as long as they went down those roads, and then go ahead and look at the story of the property. How has it changed? What kind of exterior improvements have happened? And you're absolutely right. What was under the vinyl siding if the vinyl siding was applied? Because it does take an old looking house, even a house that may have asbestos siding, and they just slapped the vinyl on top of it. You want to know what's underneath there.
So check Google Maps, talk to the neighbors. It's PEI. We're all very friendly. Look at old MLS pictures that are on file. Your agent can help you with that. And lastly, on the exterior view is high-tension wires, these ginormous electrical towers. You can do the research on Google. Just Google high-tension wires effect on residential homes or humans or something like that. There's been hundreds of studies done.
It's actually really scary because I did Google that to see the impacts on people, and it's not good. So just be mindful if you are going to. These homes do exist. I would have a hard time being an agent listing one of these because I wouldn't want to see a family with little ones purchase a home with a high tension wire, either in their front of their property or in their backyard, knowing some of the long-term effects that can happen or after long exposure to them.
Moving on to the interior, which is a shorter list, wood stoves. Why are they a concern?
Well, it's for insurance. You have to make sure, and the insurance companies change their requirements whenever they want. So just because the seller may take a position, if you're the buyer looking at this property and the seller says there's nothing wrong with it, my insurance company covers it, that doesn't mean the insurance company is going to cover it in 2025 or 2027. They can take liberty to change their policies and what they're looking for. And it could be a slight difference of, a distance from the wall of an extra half an inch. In order to get insurance on that wood stove will need to be moved.
Well, the other thing I'll ask for, is it wet certified, which I can Google, and that would be helpful as well.
And could you just, wet is WETT certification?
Correct. Styrofoam in basement walls, typically that's uncovered, is probably one of the top insurance company concerns these days because it can spontaneous or instantaneously combust and poof, you're dead. From the smell of the chemicals, those walls need to be covered up as per the insurance company's requirements.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So the insurance companies, again, nothing against off-island insurance companies, but if they're making you as a buyer do your own insurance inspection and that's missed, you could end up causing yourself to not have a claim paid for. The value of having an insurance representative go out and inspect the property is, one, they're filling out the form and they know what to look for and nothing is missed. So therefore, should an event happen where you do need to make a claim, a little bit of a peace of mind to know you're hopefully covered.
Breaker panels or fuse boxes. You are typically in PEI going to find 100 or 200 amp breaker panels. 200 amps would be more indicative of a house that has electrical heating systems in it or electrical hot water tank. You're probably not going to see a lot of fuse panels unless it's an older home, but most of them have been replaced at this point. One of the tips that I have is when I look at the breaker panel, if it is by a manufacturer called Square D, it's a very, very good make. And I know if that builder has probably spent money on that breaker panel and they've spent the money on Square D rather than putting in some cheapy breaker panel they picked at a local hardware store in a kit, they probably spent money on other things in the house, whether it be taps or flooring or cabinets.
Yeah, and if I could say, if you're buying a resale home and you're wondering, is this a flip just because it looks so pretty in that, a lot of times you could end up seeing, if it does have the Square D panel, whether it's in the basement or wherever it's located, this is a home that somebody took a lot of pride and they've been working away on over the years. So it's not something that you typically see in a quick flip house installed. The other thing is 60 amperage in a home. Insurance companies will not cover it. There are still homes on the island that have this. And unfortunately, if you are looking at it, and especially if it's 60 amp with fuses, that is going to need to be replaced prior to closing, or at least within 30 days, depending on the insurance company.
I haven't seen it here, but I've read that in other places they're starting to put 300 amp panels in. But we haven't seen that in PEI yet. At least I haven't.
I haven't seen it.
Block foundations. I would be very, very careful when you're buying a block foundation, and I would make sure that, how do I put this? I don't want to steer people away from buying block foundations. It's not the greatest solution, but if you do have one, make sure you can dig around the whole house so you can fix your basement if it leaks like a sieve.
Yeah, and a block foundation, I don't know, my opinion is I wouldn't be finishing that basement because it's a basement, which is fine. It's great for storage and that. I would be apprehensive, that's all, because I've always been told and taught it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when these are going to end up possibly leaking. Now, there are clients that I've had over the years that have had a block foundation home and said they've not ever had a problem. Wonderful. I just don't want to be the one to buy the problem later.
But if you do have a problem with the block foundation, they're typically going to want to dig around the whole house, and they're going to want to put in a plastic barrier in, which they're going to glue to the cement. They're going to tar it all down. They're going to put some sort of weeping tile system around it. You can't do this on a house if it's got a bunch of decks around it and gardens and driveways and obstructions and cement patios. So if you are buying a house and you can dig all the way around it, like a country home, a typical story and a half, that's not a big issue. But it can be if it's in the city and you can't dig around the entire house.
Yep.
Which brings us to the next point, signs of water in the basement at trim levels. Look for trim in the basement that's rotted or shows little brown signs, almost like little brown waves where there was water in the basement. You can cover the rest of this because you put the notes in there.
Yeah. So it also look for efflorescence. And what that is it's a salt crystallization coming through the basement wall as a result of a high water table or drainage that we spoke about, drain spouts not being properly draining away from the property, or the grading outside of the earth around the property is grading towards it, not away from it. So there should be sloping away from the property. But efflorescence is one of those things that would indicate, and it's like a snow on the wall, if you've ever seen that. It's
like a fuzzy snow.
Yeah, like a fuzzy snow. You'd wonder if it's mold or something, but it's not.
It's like crystallized ice.
Yeah, it does, but it's dry. And that's what it is. It's just there's a high water table.
Dehumidifiers and humidex systems, particularly dehumidifiers. If they have one or more dehumidifiers, particularly like that one we saw the other day that was the size of a tractor trailer, chances are they've got water issues. I'm not suggesting this, but some people will look inside all the closets, and sometimes you'll find dehumidifiers in the closets that they've removed for the showing. Humidex systems are great to have. I wouldn't say they're particularly indicative of a wet basement, but they're a great device to have. What they do is they bolt to the wall. They're about 4 to 5 feet tall. They suck all the cold air off the floor and shoot it out through the wall. They're great to have. They may or may not be a sign of a wet basement because they will keep the basement warmer just by getting rid of the cold air. Patty, windows, what are we looking for?
Well, if the seals have been blown, do they look cloudy? And the age of the windows, because if there are newer windows and the seals are gone, they could be under warranty and the panes could easily be replaced. If they're older windows, the wood frame windows and they're just a mess, you're going to have to budget for window replacement.
And see if they're rotten. If you see all the wood, if they're wooden windows and they're rotten, it's something you want to budget for, or maybe you could work it into your mortgage if you have one, and they can just get the windows and potentially the roofing done when you move in. Have you seen false or secondary walls in houses?
Are you talking about the walls in the basement?
I'm talking wall. You typically would see this in a house with a block basement, where what they'll do is they'll put 2x4 walls 2 to 3 inches out from the wall. So you've got like the secondary wall that's hiding all the leaking. And in one case, I was in a house, the wall was black with mold. The homeowner said they painted the wall black. And they also put little trenches in all the way around the floor. But what you're doing is you're buying a house that has sort of a fake representation in that they're hiding the block foundation and the leaking by putting a trench along the wall. And you could have mold or other health-producing issues that you just don't want. You can get air tests done. I don't know if anyone in the island does them. I believe they do. That will tell you how many particles of mold there is in a house, particularly the basement. But look out for these false walls. If the walls seem to be further in than they should, there might be something hiding in behind.
Yeah, and it could have been a homemade job to put that particular room in that basement area, that they felt this was the way their solution to, well, the walls are wet, we'll just make sure there's plenty of ventilation in behind it for the moisture condensation, the efflorescence, whatever the situation, the seepage that happens a lot of times during our heavy rain season or a heavy thaw if we do have a more heavier winter.
There was a court case years and years ago where a real estate agent, of course it was a cousin, listed their cousin's property, told the cousin to take all their boxes and put them up against the wall. Again, it was a foundation that was leaking in order to hide all the leaking. So when the purchaser went to close on the house, they discovered this wall was just covered in water, leaking like Niagara Falls. And not only did the real estate agent get sued, the cousin, but the cousin got sued too because of this. Honesty is the best policy. If you have a leaky basement, Don't hide it with boxes and suitcases and everything else.
Yeah, misrepresentation of what the actual property is, and that will come back and bite you in the butt, which is, again, as a buyer's agent, which is what the whole theme and topic is here. It would be beneficial to ask for, if it can, if it's an estate, sometimes it's not so easy, but a property condition disclosure statement because they have to actually answer these questions. Is there leakage or seepage? And a lot of the conditions of the property that you wouldn't be able to visibly necessarily see unless you've lived in the home.
Make sure you can see the walls.
I agree.
Because trying to go after somebody in court over something that may or may not have been on a PCDS, a property condition disclosure form, may be difficult to do.
Yeah, but it's hard to do that if it's a completely finished basement. So you are trusting.
In this case, we're talking boxes and suitcases.
Okay.
We've talked about false walls. The other thing I have found sometimes, and just keep in mind, this is 0.001% of home sellers that are unscrupulous, and in this particular case, you walk into a basement and none of the lights work. Why do you think that is?
Well, yeah.
Was there a bulb shortage?
Yeah, well, and talking about water in the basement and the lights not working, is everything in the basement on skids? I'm sure you've seen that.
I have. There's one house. It was on Blue Shank Road on the way to Summerside. They had skids in the basement and you could see the water flowing underneath your feet.
Not good.
I think it's recently been renovated. Bring a bright flashlight. I have the 6,000 lumen jobby. I think Patty's, just because she's overly competitive, has probably ordered the 12,000. Make sure you have bright flashlight so you can see any areas that are not lit, because they may not be lit intentionally.
We would like to think not, but as a buyer beware, protect yourself.
Anytime you go through a house, make sure you do it with Patty, because she has a beagle nose. She can smell any smells or dampness or mold in any basement. So bring her along with you for the sniff test. But these are all indicators that something is wrong. And if you walk into a house or a basement and it reeks of free breeze, that's typically not a good sign either.
Yeah, and if you're doing a virtual viewing with your agent, you should be asking them, how does it smell? And if they say, it smells fine, my next question is, what's your sense of smell like? Because you and I could go into a house together, and for you, Michael, it smells fine. And for me, I'm like, no, there's something going on here. So I would also just follow that up with, how is your sense of smell? Is it very sensitive? Because most people will say, and I mean, I know you would, no, I don't have a sensitive sense of smell. I don't have a beagle nose. For me today, it smells okay, but I know my nose is very sensitive. So just questions if you're doing a virtual showing.
Obviously, based on what we've said, we're going to look for mold on walls and ceilings, particularly in the corners. That is something you want to look for in bathrooms too, which would tell you probably if the ceiling fans are working. And I'm not telling anyone to do this, but some people, when they put these ceiling fans in, they vent them to the attic, which can turn into catastrophic problems, and it can cost you 4 and sometimes 5 figures to fix, to remove and remediate that attic. And we've had that ourselves in the house.
Yeah, we've seen this.
Between 1995 and 2007, there was a plumbing system called Kitec, Kitec. Google it. It may be major problems because the connections may fall off and the plumbing may crack. And this is never a good scene because you'll have to tear your whole house apart to replace it.
Especially if you have in-floor heating.
UV lights and softeners. Some people like softeners. Some people like UV lights. In some cases, they can be an indication that they've had water issues. If you're buying a property in PEI that doesn't have municipal water or community water, where they've had a water test done, then you'll probably be asked to get a water test done by your mortgage holder if there is one. And the UV light will eliminate any problems you have with bacteria, correct?
Yeah, so you just ask the question, was this done to be proactive or reactive? Why was the UV light installed? If it was to be reactive, it was a result of a bad water test. I think you should be aware of that.
Custom floor plans, good or bad?
I like them. I don't like the Mater, whatever that the 360 tours and that going through homes.
No, I'm talking about you walk into a house, the vendor claims, oh, we just designed this whole house from scratch, and you walk in and it's bizarro world. Remember that one house you walked in from the garage and there was this giant 10 by 11 foot space of nothingness.
I know what you're saying.
And I mentioned it to the owner and she took great offense to it.
She was very offended by you pointing out, what is this space for? What was it designed for?
It was a custom designed house, but all the spaces in that house, I'm sure you would agree, were just weird. And if I found them weird and Patty found them weird, chances are when you go to sell that house, again, it's easy to buy real estate. The exit strategy is what you need to look for, particularly if you're a real estate investor. Make sure you can sell that house. And if you got a customized floor plan that's just weird, it's going to be tougher to sell.
Yes, yeah. You want to make sure it's something that will serve a more vast audience, a family-style home, preferably, or at least a 3-bedroom kind of retirement bungalow flat or something along that line.
Getting into features. Just 3 simple points here. Water supply, is it well? Is it community, which means they probably have a well that's supplying a bunch of houses or cottages? Or is it municipal, government, typically in a city? And most importantly, is it a year-round supply? If you're buying a cottage intending to live in it year-round, you may find out that they turn the water supply off or they close the gate to the entrance and you can't get in. Other things, HOA fees and private communities, what does it cover? Snow, grass cutting, common areas, is there a clubhouse, maybe a little golf course? Hebrides is a great example of this. On to our next subject, data to view. What should the potential purchaser view? Probably after they've seen the house and they have an interest.
Yeah, so the list of things, information that you can request as a buyer to make sure that you are informed is the MLS history, geolink documents, which is maps, registry.
Well, the MLS history, let's just get back to that for a second. That's going to give you what they bought it for, what it sold for. Is there been any price reductions? How long has it been on the market? At what price has it been on the market? So that's really important.
Yeah, how many times it expired? Have they been trying to sell it for 3 years and this is just a brand new listing that you're assuming is new? There are listings people would assume that a listing would slowly be coming down. I've seen listings where it expired, say, in 2024, using our recent dates as an example, and then they decided in 2025, I want to bring the price up. So they wanted to add another 20,000. Now, it could be justified. They may have had to do some home remedies or repairs, or it's just this is what the seller ended up having in their mind, that I think our property is priced too low. I think if we put it up higher, this is what will actually get it sold. You'll want to know that from a negotiation standpoint because you already know the seller's previous lower dollar.
Other things you're going to look for, geolink documents would include a map, a registry, copy of the deed. You want to look at a plot plan or a survey. You want to know how old that plot plan or survey is and if it's accurate. Orthophoto, which is like a satellite view, including the property lines. They're not 100% accurate, but they may give you an indication if there's any property encroachments. Also, bills, particularly in houses that are heated with electrical. You want to know what the electrical bills are for the past, keeping in mind that those are indicative of the current owner's usage and not maybe yours.
Yeah, you'll want to do a reverse CMA on the property to make sure that you are paying fair market value. Usually if it's listed with a realtor, you will be usually not too bad. However, as a buyer, you would want to make sure that your agent knows how to do a reverse CMA.
When you said you'd be not too bad, it would not be too bad if it was listed through an agent. I wouldn't assume that because the vendor's making the decision as to what they're listing the property as. So have your agent. The listing agent represents the seller. They don't represent the buyer.
No, I realize that. But typically, a realtor
is going to do their best job to get the house on at market value.
Versus if it's a private sale.
Well, private sales are a different world. We've discussed those. Access to internet, just because it's 2025, doesn't necessarily mean you have access to internet everywhere in the island, but there's different types: fiber, cable, wireless, DSL. I don't know if there is in dial-up, but look that up. Land size, is there multiple parcels? Find out how much land you have, if you don't already know. Regulations, is it a heritage house? And what are the implications to that? Restrictive and/or protective covenants will tell you what you can and cannot do with your property. They're good to have, but you should also be aware of the requirements that are named therein. Subdividing. If you're thinking of subdividing, think twice. You may not be able to do it, particularly if it's a larger piece of land and you have to go through IRAC, Island Regulatory Appeals Commission. And is there a home inspection done, or is there an appraisal?
So one thing I was going to say with regards to the IRAC, we've come across this in the last week where there's been a property that has been identified forever. It's not just a 10 or 12-year identification. And when a property is identified, it means it cannot be developed, subdivided, like you had said before, Michael, on previous podcasts. This property now is what it is, and that is all it will ever be. So whether it's a single family structure. The other thing I was going to say with regards to the land sizes and checking your documents, verify that on the MLS cut sheet that you have, and then the ortho maps and the deeds and tax reports, that it's the same PID number. We just came across this again in the last week where the MLS had the wrong PID number, and there's been a bit of a scramble that one of my agents had to do to correct it with amendments and documents. And I mean, I was very pleased that they caught this before we got too far into the whole process. But as a buyer, just click and reconcile. Don't assume that everybody is perfect and no one makes mistakes.
Lastly, and sorry to keep this so long, but like I said, we had a lot to cover, making a list and a decision. So from your driving around, remember, it's sort of, it's dangerous when you drive around and make an opinion on a house, because some of these houses outside, they really don't look all that great, but inside they're amazing. So weigh your driving around with the pictures and the video and whatever else is available online. And then make your list of 5 or 6 from that driving tour, because this is practically what you can see in a day.
Correct.
Compare apples to apples. Do not look at houses for $850 and compare them to a house for $125, and don't compare houses in Surrey to a house in Panmure Island, or more appropriately, North Enmore for Ebbsfleet or Mimnegash or something.
Yeah.
Compare price ranges and areas together if you can.
Yes, because it creates a stressful experience trying to decide, and you actually end up making no decision. I just don't know. I can't make a decision. It's because you're all over the place.
Right. Obviously, if you're looking at anything, if I'm looking at a computer, one's $30,000 and the other one's $1,200, we know which one's going to be better. So we're comparing apples to apples. We're picking 5 to 6 houses. And then when we view them in person with an agent, we are comparing house number 1 to house number 2, and we're eliminating one. I know you have a different system.
No, that's basically, I allow them to look at the first 1 or 2 and say which one would be your top pick out of those 2. Okay. And then we look at house number 3, which one out of the 3 is going to be completely eliminated and not an option, because they're usually sometimes pretty close. So, and it's nice to have primary one that, you know what, I love this house. This is my pick for today. But it's also nice to be able to say, I have a backup just in case. Take excellent notes. It is so important to do that so that you can keep everything straight, because the houses all start to overlap and blend into one. Next thing you know, you've rebuilt a completely different house that doesn't exist because it's this lot with this bathroom and that looking, structure. And it can become very stressful when you're in your hotel room.
If you have 6 houses and you're trying to base a decision on 6 houses, your memory will be most likely of the last 2 you've seen, and the first few will fade away, and you get everything messed up. You'll think, was this living room in that house? Was that bedroom in this house? Is this the one that had the nice garage, or is it number 4, not number 1? That's why I say take number 1, compare it to number 2. Next thing is we're going to make an offer. I think we've had an episode on that.
Yeah.
So you're going to make your offer. I would probably do it in the morning when everyone's fresh, not at night after you've been looking at houses and your head's a mess. Do it in the morning. You've had a chance to make some notes, some thoughts, maybe think of what you want included in it, offer, price, and so forth, closing date.
Yeah, as an agent, what I do for my buyers is I will do a template offer and I'll send it to them at night when I know that's the property. but it's only a draft just so that they can start to kind of go through it, especially if they're not physically right with me, and know what the whole documentation is going to look like. So they're not overwhelmed by everything that has been put forth. But I know we covered that on a previous podcast as well.
The other thing is, if I look at a house at 2:00 in the afternoon and I make an offer at 5:00 in the evening, it sort of tells the vendor that I'm super desperate for that house and I'm highly motivated to buy it, which in most cases I'm going to lose leverage, in my opinion. The best negotiators are always time, which is the ability to walk away, emotional distance, not being emotionally connected to a transaction, which is hard for a lot of people to do. And I think that's basically it. I've got time, emotional distance, the ability to walk away, which are sort of synonymous. And also know the market.
Mm-hmm. Is it a buyer's market, a seller's market, a balanced market? That will help you determine what kind of offer you're putting forth. But I will just disagree with you a little bit, Michael. I wouldn't put it off necessarily till the next day. I would keep the momentum, keep things rolling. Sometimes buyers can talk themselves out of it and then regret talking themselves out of it. So when that momentum and the decision has been made, I'd like to keep the train rolling and keep them moving forward. They're usually very appreciative because this is overwhelming. It can be very stressful. Certain personality types, they become overwhelmed with it all. But as long as I just keep everything flowing and we don't worry about, there's a showing the next morning at 10 a.m. And if we didn't do our documentation the evening before, I could have cost my clients the property.
So know the market, have all your data that we mentioned in that list, keep good notes. Patty touched on that. And I also suggest take some photos.
Mm-hmm. As long as they're allowed.
Yes. As long as they're allowed, it's usually on the MLS cut sheet. I think pretty well any house I've ever seen has allowed it.
Most of them. I do see a few that do not allow photos.
Keep everything straight, assist you in so basically that's it. Between your notes and your photos, that's going to keep everything straight because you're going to know where you are. It's going to give you a great refresher, and that's it.
That is everything, or mostly everything that you would need to know if you are buying a home, whether Prince Edward Island or anywhere else. Some of the things are more relevant to PEI to help protect you, which is why we say if we were to dump all of this on you while you're looking at a property, you would become completely overwhelmed and stressed out. But to have the list here, you can put down the bullets, what is most important. Hopefully this episode was very helpful for you. You may want to listen to it a second time just to make sure that you don't miss anything. And hopefully you have an awesome buying experience and you buy that home that you have no problems, meets your needs, and you have years worth of wonderful memories.
And you're able to sell it if you decide to move. I do have these show notes on a Microsoft Word file, so if anyone does want a copy of them to save themselves some writing in case they've missed anything, just email Patty or I. Thanks very much for listening to the show. Be sure to give us a star rating, follow or subscribe, and have a great day. This has been our longest episode ever, so I think what we'll do is we'll speed it up by 50%, so you don't sound like chipmunks playing 20 minutes.
Yes, thanks for listening. Have a great day. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon.
Bye for now.